Now, the international peace envoy for Syria, Kofi Annan, says he's handed over a set of concrete proposals aimed at diffusing the Syria crisis. Mr Annan has held a second round of talks with the country's president, Bashar al-Assad.
Professor Bob Bowker spent years in the Middle East as a diplomat and served as the Australian ambassador to Egypt and Syria. He's now an adjunct professor at the Australian National University in Canberra, and he joins us now from our Parliament House studio. Bob Bowker, good morning.
Good morning.
How confident were you that President Bashar al-Assad was seriously committed to ending the crisis as part of these peace talks with Kofi Annan?
I think Assad and the regime are quite determined to continue to crush the insurrection and to, at the same time, maintain a dialogue with Annan on behalf of the Security Council and the Arab League. But realistically, there's still some way to go, I think, before the conditions for a cessation of this violence can be met.
And it's hard to negotiate with a president who continues to argue, as he did during those talks with Kofi Annan, that those fighting government forces were not the Syrian rebel army or people angry about his regime, but nothing more than, as he described them, terrorists.
Yes, it's a dialogue of the deaf at the moment, I'm afraid. One can only hope that the level of violence reduces somewhat as the regime asserts its control over places such as Homs and Idlib, and that on the basis of that and people recognising that arming the rebels is not going to produce a political solution, there may be some capacity for people such as Annan to talk sense to both sides.
OK, where does the international community go from here, Bob Bowker?
I think the focus has to be on talking to the Iranians about their level of support to the Assad regime, the Saudis and the Qataris about how much support they're trying to pump into the insurrection, and getting both sides to even possibly talk to each other about what they want to see emerge in Syria in due course. I think the Russians also have a part to play in trying to persuade Assad to lower the intensity of his violence against those who are opposing him, and particularly to facilitate access by the Red Cross and by humanitarian aid agencies whose support is desperately needed at the moment.
Now, the foreign ministers involved in trying to end this conflict, led by the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, are meeting in New York tomorrow to try for yet another international attempt to stop the crisis. But really, for as long as Russia and China are at this stage having that veto on any UN Security Council action, that avenue remains pretty much closed.
Yes, but it's interesting that the Russians appear to have persuaded the Arab League representatives, who they met in Cairo yesterday, to set aside the demand that Assad should step down as a precondition for talks. Now, that could, in fact, encourage the Syrians to engage more seriously in negotiations. On the other hand, it could also divide the rebels, because on the one hand you have within the rebel movement these constant demands for more arms and for no negotiations until Assad steps aside. On the other hand, you have voices within Syria, the coordinating committee, which has always said, no, we can't expect the regime to step aside. What we need to do is stop the violence and engage in serious discussions without that violence overhanging all of us.
You pointed earlier to the concerns about arming the rebels, because there are still very deep concerns in the international community about A, the fragmentation of the opposition, but B, more worryingly, the prospect of the rebel groups being infiltrated by Sunni Islamists and creating a whole different set of problems.
Well, the whole problem with arming the insurrection is that, firstly, we don't know what political program you can achieve by arming the rebels. You may wind up, in fact, I think you probably would wind up with a higher level of violence and still a political stalemate. And we may well find the regime outlast the country at this rate.
So are you as optimistic as Kofi Annan looking toward the next few weeks and months, Bob Bowker?
Annan sensibly maintained a positive spin on his discussions. He's in there for the long haul. He had to make it clear that he saw a willingness on all sides to find a peaceful way out of this, but really the hard yards are yet to be run.
Bob Bowker, it's always terrific getting your insights. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Michael.